Welcome to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I am your host, as always, Jeremy, here trying to make the world seem a little more normal. And tonight, we might achieve that a little bit, actually. I know I say that all the time, and then we never do, but tonight we actually might achieve that. So we'll see how it goes. But of course, to help me do that is a guest, as always. And my guest tonight is Rob Gutro, who is I said the last name right? I forgot to ask about that.
Gutro, it's fine.
Good. I'm glad. He is an author of many, many books, which we'll get into later. He is a paranormal investigator and a medium slash pet medium, which not my first pet medium, but I definitely love talking to them because they're always interesting stories. So, pleasure to have you on, Rob. How you doing tonight?
Good. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. This is a treat.
Of course, I'm always happy to talk to different people in the paranormal world of my podcast. And when I read the information you submitted, I was like, "Ooh, definitely an interesting one. I gotta have him on." So, but to start things off, the first question I ask everybody, and I'm sure you already know this, but what got you into the paranormal world?
Well, I was kind of thrust into the paranormal world, and it was unexpected. It was back when I was a teenager, and I think that one of your previous guests mentioned the same thing happened to her. My grandfather appeared to me about 6 or 7 months after he died, and he appeared to me in full color. And being home by myself with the family dog, I was scared. I was petrified. So I ran out of the house and I waited for my parents to come home, and I told them. And my mother wasn't surprised. So I found out that she had the ability and that it ran in her side of the family. She never used it, though, because she was afraid of it. So I kind of buried it for a long, long time after that.
Which that happens a lot from what I've been told in the past. It does. Either our parents don't want to talk about that type of stuff, or they don't understand it fully, and they just kind of tell people to hush it up, which is not the best approach in my mind. But I mean, for the time when it happened, that's very understandable.
So in terms of what happened in my family, because my mother understood that the gift, because she heard her mother after her mother passed away, and she was just afraid. But with me, um, it wasn't that I was afraid of it. I just didn't. I was surprised by it after I thought about it, and then I just got busy with life. I went to college. I got a career, and things happen. And when you're distracted, you tend to tune those things out. And that's what happened to me until my puppy passed away in 2005, and he reawakened everything, and he basically blew the doors off the other side for me. And I started communicating with him and people right afterward. So it's crazy.
Well, of course, I'm sorry to hear about the puppy because I actually just recently had a puppy die back in September, and at 18 weeks old, it was very heartbreaking. But
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
yeah, he didn't really so much die as had to get put down because he was born with misshapen kidneys, and there was no way to fix it. They don't do organ transplants like that in dogs yet. So, and even if they did, I can't imagine how much that would cost. So, I mean, it gets to a point where you have to say goodbye to the little fella. But
Well, at least he found you and your family who understood what had to happen and for his benefit. So that takes an incredible amount of courage to help your dog pass out of pain. And they always thank me from the other side. They always say thank you to their pet parents for finding that courage, because it means you learned their lesson, which was unconditional love. So
yeah, poor little guy too. He was so happy that one day we went to say goodbye to him. He was so happy to see us, but you could just tell he was not happy. He was suffering and in pain. Like he never got big. He was a mastiff, and even at 18 weeks old, he was still only like 18, 20 pounds. So
wow.
yeah, and we have two other mastiffs still. So like we knew right away something was wrong if he's not getting big like immediately. They always get huge as puppies. And I hear your dog in the background as well.
Yeah, it's one of three in the background.
Oh yeah, but trust me, if I didn't take mine out just now, you would already hear them barking probably. So, but so your dog died, and that kind of reawoken your paranormal side and reawoken your abilities. And how? Well, just I know how, but just tell the listeners how you've been using those in a general way since.
So it took a while to figure out what to do with all this. When my puppy passed away, I used to keep a journal. And that was a good thing because, as it turned out, I would write down every single thing that happened. And I realized that none of these things are coincidental. When it comes to spirits on the other side making things happen, there's no such thing as a coincidence. So you may think um, you see something that relates to a person or pet in spirit, and it really does. And it's because that person or pet in spirit influenced you to go there at that very moment, that very day, that very hour, and see exactly what they want you to see. So you'll be reminded of them.
Which
So
it's funny. It's funny you say that because for weeks after he passed, my wife could have swore like she smelled him in the room, like he was still next to her. So, and I was like, it's. I told her, I'm like, it's possible. I mean, I
mhm.
talked to enough people to know that's entirely possible. So, I mean,
Yeah, it is. And I've spoken to a number of pet parents that have conveyed that their pet's scent will mysteriously appear in the home. And usually it's around a birthday, anniversary, or holiday, or right after their passing. So scent is one of the ways, one of the many ways that pets will let us know that they are there. So was it right after he passed?
literally for like days to weeks after he passed, like my wife would just get a random like sniff of his scent, and like I would say, smell his toy or smell Munchkin, our other mastiff at the time, and see if maybe the smells on him on her. And no, it would never. It never would smell like that. Like it had to be like he was. I mean, we brought his ashes home, so 10 to 1, he probably is still around, like stuck to them or something.
Well, so what they normally do is they will cross over usually immediately because either a person or a pet in spirit will come to meet them, and then they will help them cross. And once they cross over, then they have the ability to come right back. They have the ability to come back and give signs. So often what happens after a dog or a cat passes away is that they tend to come back pretty quickly to visit in order to give signs to let us know they're okay. And that's what your dog was doing with your wife. And it takes a lot of energy to create a scent, just as it does to create an appearance. And I'm a scientist in my day job, a meteorologist. So all of my books are use energy as a foundation to explain how they get strong enough, what kind of energy they use, and how they communicate.
Oh, I was actually going to ask that pretty soon, like what kind of scientist you were, and meteorologist. That sums it up right there.
So don't blame me for the weather, but
I, I blame the alien matrix we live in for the weather.
there you go.
Yeah, I don't know the weather is crazy in the Northeast United States where I live. So it's just it'll be raining it'll be snowing one day, and then the next day it all melts in rain or sun. So it makes no sense. But it's winters aren't the same anymore. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, they're not. I actually grew up in Massachusetts, and
Oh, that's where I live.
oh well, they see there you go. And I remember 4 foot snows, especially 1978. The blizzard of 1978 was traumatic. They don't have those anymore, really. Just once in a great while, those massive storms. But back in the 70s and even the 80s, the snow would stay on the ground throughout most of the winter. We don't have that anymore.
No, we really don't. I mean, it seems like here as soon as it all melts, we get a little more. But I mean, which is I prefer it that way. Honestly, I don't even bother snow blowing my driveway anymore because within a week it'll be melted. So just no one comes to my house anyway. So why bother snow blowing it? My car can handle it. So, but
Well, that's climate change in action for sure.
yeah, whoever said global warming is not a real thing. But so my second question always is,
Mhm.
what kind of encounters have you had, whether they be ghost, spirit, alien, extraterrestrial, list goes on. But I have a feeling you're going to be more in the first category than anything. But you may surprise me.
So I've had encounters with a number of different things. Um, First of all, I have a definition for earthbounds versus people and pets that have crossed over. So that was the foundation of my first book called Ghosts versus Spirits. I consider ghosts earthbound, and they choose to stay earthbound. Spirits are the ones that cross over. They join the energy of the universe, heaven, Valhalla, paradise, whatever you want to call the other side. And there's a big difference. And I've learned by communicating with both that, first of all, when we pass, the energies that are within us, the physical energies, if you think of cell splitting, if you think of blood pumping and so forth, when that body comes to an end, that energy combines with memories, personality, and knowledge of this life. And then we choose. We choose to either stay at a fixed location here on Earth, one that we're usually familiar with, unless it's an accident or we're killed there by or we die there, or we cross over and join heaven or paradise or whatever. Ghosts are limited to communicating only within the place they chose. So that's why houses are haunted. People that usually either were raised in a house or died in a house choose to stay in that particular house. That's why prisons are haunted. People who die in prisons stay behind. They stay there in the prison. And one interesting thing, Jeremy, that I learned about ghosts is that a number of them choose to stay behind because they're afraid of crossing over. When we die, we get kind of a life review. If you read about near-death experiences, people will talk about a life review, quick flash of a life review. And if they see something that they did wrong in life that they think they're going to be judged on, they will stay behind as an earthbound ghost for fear of what's on the other side.
Yeah.
What I've learned though is that there is nothing to fear on the other side. It's all love and acceptance and peace, but there are different levels of the other side. So there can be, I think in Japanese lore, there are 7 levels. I've heard of 3 levels, and I just go by 3 because that's what I'm used to hearing. My own aunt was on the lowest level on the other side, who begged for forgiveness from my mother for 25 years. That's a story in itself.
Yeah.
But I have encountered poltergeist activity, which is simulating a ghost using the energy of the mind, using emotional energy. And in the, I think 4 or 5 cases I've been on that we've figured out as poltergeist activity, it all came from teenagers, whether boy or girl.
Interesting. And yeah, as far as near-death experiences go, I've had 2 or 3 on the show before, and they all have different. I mean, it amazes me because they all have different versions of what happens after you pass. Like they all have different stories basically to tell of what happened to them, and it's always different. And that's just like, which kind of makes me think: is our afterlife kind of based on what we expect it to be, and is it our mind just projecting things out there into the world?
Yeah, I just read a great book called After, and I can't remember the name of the doctor that wrote it. He studied near-death experiences for 40 years, and he came to a conclusion that some of them will, some of our beliefs will influence some of the near-death experiences, but others report seeing themselves out of their own bodies, looking at themselves on an operating table. One fascinating chapter in his book, and I don't remember his name, but was from a woman who died on the operating table, and she remembers seeing her doctor look like he was flapping his arms, but it was a practice that he did to get his gloves on correctly, and nobody would know that unless they were in the operating room, and she was out. So
Hmm.
So the doctor was kind of freaked out by that. But so that's an interesting near-death experience.
Yeah, I mean they're always different. I mean, I've had ones
Hmm.
where I had one where he talked to a shadowy figure behind in a door of light when he was staying in a room of darkness, and he was just talking to this figure for what seemed like days about his life and about what he could do better, and if he wanted to go, it was his choice if he wanted to come back or not, of course. And the other ones I cannot think of off the top of my head because they were a long time ago. I interviewed them, but it's just they've always been different. That part always stuck out to me, and you also, I mean, you keep mentioning heaven, Valhalla, whatever you want to call the overworld. I'll call it, I guess.
Sure.
But have you heard? What do you think about the idea of like an underworld? Whether you want to call it hell, Hades, take your pick. But
Um, I just think that's the lowest level of the afterlife. Because my aunt came through, she was kind of stuck there because she did some things, a lot of things that she regretted in life. And although she crossed over, she stayed in the lowest level. And people on the lowest level, um, I guess it's kind of like the idea of, I don't know, purgatory or something. But it's but people can certainly move up from the other side. But all they need is forgiveness, and they need to forgive themselves. They need forgiveness from people sometimes, living people. I don't I have not encountered anybody that's gone to a bad place.
so you never encountered a demon, for lack of a better word?
No, but I do have a theory about that though, about demons. Um,
Interesting.
as a scientist, I'm going to pull out my scientist hat here. um, I know that astrophysicists have uh, discovered over 5,000 exoplanets. An exoplanet is a planet that orbits another star. I
Yeah.
know that there are another 4,800 that have not yet been cataloged, and several of them are what's called the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is actually the proper position away from a star to support life, and that's where the Earth is. The Earth sits in what's called the Goldilocks zone in our solar system. So that said, and we already found water on like Jupiter, some of Jupiter's moons, and
Yep.
water throughout other planets in the solar system. So we know water is the key to life. So is carbon. So life has to exist somewhere else. So as a scientist, um, I know that we're not alone. um, but I think these are energies of life forms from other solar systems or other universes that come here. And when they come here and they see us, they think, "Wow, those are hostile, strange-looking things. I'm going to be on the defensive." So they act like a cornered animal, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what a demon is. That's just my opinion, but um, but I do know that there's got to be life on on other planets. There's too many of them.
Oh, 100%. I mean, anybody who tries to tell me these days that there's not life in other planets, I have to ask them, are you educated? Like, do you not realize the probability of there not being life in other planets? Like,
Yeah.
it's really low, but it just, but if that's your idea, if that's your theory on what demons are,
Mhm.
how does that explain, well, how would you explain possessions then in some way? Like,
I think possessions can be enabled if people have like a weaker mind, like they don't have any faith in themselves. They have a very low willpower. Um, it's just like scammers preying on people who uh, don't take the time to look into things. Really, um, anybody can be manipulated. It just depends on how resistant you are. Um, uh, and I will say that in terms of the religious aspect of it, I'm not a religious guy, but I will tell you that there is something in the power of prayer, because prayer is a positive emotional energy. So when you have a negative entity like that tries to take possession of somebody, and you use prayer, that's a positive emotional energy that's countering it. So that's how I can understand that prayer will help with anything that's any bad entity that's trying to take somebody over.
Yeah, because I mean, technically, prayer isn't about really even praying to like a higher power of any kind. It's just about
Yeah,
believing in yourself enough that you have the power to repel something, or that
exactly. Yeah,
you have the power to have, or it's to give you good luck or boost your confidence a little. Like I could understand that. That makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I guess I mean possession also. I mean, because to me, it's not just the other planets; it's other dimensions that we have to worry about more.
hmm,
Because
sure.
I I don't know if you heard that this episode, but I talked to a astral projection and lucid dreaming expert who experiences it all the time, and he basically says that like there's a lot of other dimensions out there, and he's been to a lot of them, and some of them you get the pleasant feeling from you see other beings there, and you don't get bad feelings about them. You feel like they're good beings. But he said some of these dimensions, you see some of these beings, and they horrify you. Like they just like not, he couldn't even describe what they look like, but they're just horrifying. Some of them are huge. That's the one thing he did say is that some of them are huge. Like so, I think a lot of it is interdimensional beings as well, which that would explain why possession can happen if it's a being from another dimension and we can't even see it. They just can kind of go into our bodies or go
Sure.
into our minds, which
Yeah, I mean, people used to think that when you got sick, that you were possessed by a demon. Way back in ancient times, when they couldn't understand why people were having delusions. Um, but and that was an actual bacterial thing. So it could be a life form from another, dimension or whatever could certainly react the same way. So
yeah, yeah, which to me, I mean, that's just one of my many ideas on why these things that happen. But
there's a
because I
lot to
mean,
think about.
oh, trust me, there are nights I lay there in bed just thinking about these things, and it'll be like 3 hours, and I won't even realize it went by.
Oh
But
my gosh, you need a Benadryl. Knock yourself out.
I have a smokable version of that, but no, yeah. But so, and also there's something else you mentioned that I wanted to touch on, but well, yeah, I mean, when you said that we don't get judged necessarily when we go to an afterlife, we don't. There's no one there judging us. There's no our heart against the weight of a feather like the ancient Egyptians thought, or
Mhm.
there's no meeting Saint Peter at the pearly gates having him read a list of your sins. Like it's just you basically are judged on what's in your heart. That's what you're saying, right? Like you get judged based on what you think of yourself.
Yeah, that's what people seem to say. And I mean, they do talk about the only thing they've alluded to with me is that they've met it seems like an entity that is just radiating love and acceptance. So you can call that what you want. If, religious people would call it maybe God, but um, or just call it positive energy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not religious myself either, so I mean, I wouldn't wouldn't even know what to begin with. I would probably call him Thanos or something just for fun. But
Right, there you go. I'm a big comic book fan, by the way.
oh well, there you go. Yeah, I got a couple thousand of them sitting in the basement. So
Me too.
I
So one thing, speaking of comic books, one thing that's interesting that I do whenever I go on paranormal investigations is when I was a kid, I used to draw and write my own comics. So that talent has come in handy because when I go on paranormal investigations, I'm actually able to sketch out what the ghost is that I'm talking to. And in my books, in all of my books except for the pets books, um, you'll see my sketches of what the ghosts look like, and quite a few times I've found the actual person. I found a picture of the actual person and put them side by side, and it's pretty crazy.
I would imagine. Yeah, I mean that's unique. I've never met anybody else that says they did that investigation. I've talked to a lot of paranormal investigators. That's very unique. That's kind of cool. It's kind of like being a. I mean, you almost got a job with the police doing that, but
Right. But except it's already too late. they're
well, yeah.
they're already dead.
Well, I mean, it's always a chance to solve crimes after they happen and put the right person away. But
Well, this is true. Actually, a relative of mine, I found out, used to help solve murders in Massachusetts, in Eastern Massachusetts, before I was born.
huh,
So
interesting.
I don't quite have that ability. Um, and and frankly, even though I communicate with people as earthbound ghosts or spirits that have crossed over, I decided last year or the year 2 years ago that I only wanted to communicate with pets who have crossed over. I don't want to do readings for people who have crossed over, because pets are just full of love, and people have too many hangups. So um, there was one reading that actually really disturbed me. The last human reading I did, and a woman had just written me and asked me to communicate with her dad, and her dad, although he crossed over, he confessed to being physically abusive and other horrible things. And I had to put this in an email to her. And I don't know her. I don't know where she lives. I only knew her first name, and I only had the picture of her father. And she confirmed every single thing. And I told her this was so disturbing to me that I'm just going to stick with pets.
Well, I can't blame you. I mean, I'm sure that was a shocking experience and a half, just having to talk to someone like that, even after they die, and just the fact that they're reliving those memories with you, even if, especially those bad memories. Like, even if they didn't think of them as bad, they're still horrible memories. Like, that's just sad.
Yeah, yeah. And he wanted forgiveness, of course. But
Of course.
so, but I have encountered a lot of ghosts whenever I go on vacation, and that's the topic of one of my 3 series of books. Um, so I have 3 series of books. One is Pets in the Afterlife, and I have 4 books in that series. The other one is Ghosts and Spirits, and there are 4 books in that series. And then the other one is Ghosts on a Medium's Vacation, because whenever I take a vacation, there are a lot of dead people that want to talk to me.
Yeah, it seems to be a theme. One of my first guests in the show was an author who wrote. It's a fiction book she wrote, but she based it on real life stories from mediums and psychics, and like that. That was like a theme in the book, is that he was getting attacked by ghosts constantly in the first book until his brother who was a spirit learned to defend him. So it was it seems to be an ongoing thing, but yeah, let's kind of talk about Pets in the Afterlife series, because
Okay.
you wrote 4 of them, which kind of like I was like, there's that much. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's different stories and experiences, but like there's actually like that much science behind all of it to write that many books about it.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. So the books, each of the 4 books are somewhat different. So the first book is really has a lot of the science in it. I explain the science of energy, that we touched upon earlier, but I also explain the science of learning. How dogs, I use dogs as a baseline because the gentleman that I've read up, that I referenced rather, Stanley Coren, um, wrote a number of books about the intelligence of dogs and how dogs think. So he concluded that dogs have the intelligence of a 3 to 5 year old human child. As such, they have the ability to communicate what they've learned. So they can, if you think about it, as a dog dad, they know language, they know words, they know routine. um, they know when you're happy, they know when you're sad, they know when you're sick, they pay attention to you, and they know when you're not happy, when you're mad at them, and then they don't hang around. um, so dogs are very observant. Cats are too. And what they do is they use that information to communicate with us the way that they usually did when they were alive. So some of the ways that pets communicate is you may hear sounds like nails on the floor, you may hear a collar jingle, you may hear a bark or a meow that sounds like it's coming from a different room. They may lead you to a pet that looks like them. Um, there's a whole host of things that they can do. So, and book 1 also has chapters by 3 other medium friends of mine who have also communicated with their dogs.
Interesting.
book 2 is really it's about all domesticated animals: cats, dogs, birds, horses, gerbils, rabbits, and I've communicated with all of those. Um, and Pets 3 and 4, Pets 3 is exclusively dogs, and Pets 4 is that just came out January 10th of this year, 2023, is about cats. So they're all a little different.
Yeah, and so gerbils, though, I mean, they actually are intelligent enough to like talk to in the afterlife in a way.
I know, it's surprising, isn't it? You wouldn't think, but any living thing knows enough to to eat, to seek shelter. They can look around and they can convey what they're seeing. They can remember words to a degree. They can, of course, sense temperature. So there's a lot of instinctual things going on there as well. Granted, the communications from something like a gerbil would be very minimal, but there are enough things that can give a unique sign to let me know that I'm talking to a specific animal.
Yeah, which I mean, well, I mean, I grew up having guinea pigs, so I get that they have some form of intelligence. At least guinea pigs did. I mean, I always thought gerbils and hamsters were a little lower, but I mean, guinea pigs are like the most intelligent of those families of rodents, and I mean, you could tell they have emotions. You could tell when they need something or want something, like just the way they look at you or chirp at you, basically. But I mean, so I kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So a lot of times, though, I have been asked about horses because a lot of people have horses in different parts of the country, and horses are very intelligent. They're very intuitive. One gentleman that I just met at one of my last events told me that that he has quite a number of horses, and his favorite horse passed away, and he was very distraught over the passing of his horse. And within 2 weeks of the horse's passing, he was in the barn with all of the horses, but he heard the distinct whinny of the horse that passed away on the other side of the barn. So he said he knew that his horse had passed away and all his horses were accounted for in front of him, but he still went out to check. And of course it stopped as soon as he neared, but
of course.
But he knew that horse was there, giving him a sign to let him know that he was okay.
Yeah, and you're actually not the first psychic I talked to that could talk to horses. And horses, I mean, I can imagine they would be very intelligent. The woman we got our mastiffs from breeds race horses too, and races and uses them for racing actually. But so like we used to spend a little bit of time with the horses because my daughter would love to see them, and it's just interesting how their personalities are all so different. Like each one has its own like traits, and it's amazing. It's they're. I always was one through that liked horses. Like even growing up, like going horseback riding was like one of my favorite things to do, like for school field trips and stuff. So they are magnificent animals. Do I want to own one? God no, but too expensive for me. But
and they can sense, who is whose energy works with them. Sometimes if you get an unruly horse, what appears to be an unruly horse, it's that the horse's energy is not matching yours, so that's their instinct. But they're really intuitive.
yeah, it's funny. My wife says with our newest mastiff that we have, that's about 4 months old now, that his energy must match mine because we're both so lazy. Because he instantly is always attracted to me, and he always wants to like just sit in the couch behind me or next to me while I'm watching TV and whatnot. So like his energy and mine are very in sync. I'll open their cages to go let him out, and he won't even want to get out of his cage. He'll just be laying there for the longest time till he finally pops his head up.
He's just living the high life, taking it easy.
Tell me about it. And he never needs a leash. He doesn't really need a leash ever. Like if we're home, he'll just follow you around, and then if you tell him, "Come on, time to go back in," he'll go right back in. Like he's unlike my older one, who is a freaking nut. And if I took her off a leash, he would try to kill our chickens again, or run to the road after a car. Like she's just not that intelligent.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, everybody has their own personalities, that's for sure.
Oh, I tell her she's a goof. I tell her all the time. She's just a big doofus. Like she just the way she walks, the way she looks at you, she's a big doofus. But you gotta love them, no matter what. Unfortunately, but yeah, she's hopefully she'll be a good mommy someday. I hope.
So have you noticed that your two dogs have stared at like the corner of a room or even stared up toward the ceiling at any point in time after your other dog passed away?
Um, well, not so much just after the other dog passed away because I do live in a house that has a spirit in it.
Oh,
So, or I guess you would call him a ghost. But um, I he and it's the person who originally built the house back in the '60s, and he still resides here. I've had multiple psychics, mediums be able to sense him just talking to me on my show, or I even had paranormal. Before I started the show, even I had paranormal investigators come in and look into it, and we communicated with him, and they believed his wife is here too, though no one has confirmed that since. So I'm not sure how many we have, but he he was that spirit or that ghost was killing our chickens that when they were in the garage originally. Like
oh my God.
we would come out in the morning and find them like dead in the ground, like they're flattened, and we couldn't figure out why because there's no animals. They were inside the back of our garage. There was no animals getting in there at all, besides maybe a mouse or two. But the chickens would kill them anyway. And I mean, we had guinea hens too. We thought the guinea hens might be doing it, pushing them off the loft or something, but we don't. We now I've had mediums confirm that it was him doing it because he doesn't think that chickens belong in the house.
Wow.
And
Okay.
apparently the garage was his area too, so he's very protective of his garage.
So did
So
somebody try to cross him over?
I haven't yet. I have had a couple offers, and I'm still working on getting details confirmed out. But I gotta get them crossed over just because I'd like to be able to put the dogs in the garage during the summer, but I
Mhm.
mean, but I but our one dog was in there back in the late summer fall this year, and she would scream bloody murder at night and like make us run out there because we like it sounded like someone was stabbing her or something or like kicking her. Or, like it was the worst sound I ever heard come out of her
Oh
mouth,
my
and
gosh.
we'd run out there and let her out of her cage, and she would just run in the house at full speed, like not looking back, not even waiting for us to see if we had food or anything, like just running because something scared the crap out of her in that
Sounds
garage.
like
And
that ghost doesn't like any animals.
apparently not. I mean,
Yeah.
from I've because his relatives live all around us. And I've asked like questions before, like, did he ever own a pets or did he have any kids? And they were like, no, no, like they never could have kids, and
Uh,
they didn't have any pets. We don't, at least as far as I could tell, they didn't have any pets. So, but it's weird. I mean, I have to get someone to clear him out because he's a nuisance to some degree. I mean,
yeah, he
if you
needs to
stay,
pack his spiritual suitcase and cross over.
yeah, I mean, if you stay out of the garage, he kind of leaves you alone. But my wife does get creepy, eerie feelings throughout the whole house, and she's a
Yeah.
little more sensitive to these things than I am. So she senses when he's near a lot more than I do. But though I was doing a show last week on someone else's podcast, and one of the mediums on it was like, yeah, he's right there next to you in the room watching you. And then like by the end of the show, like, oh yeah, he left. He went back to wherever he likes to go.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's it's an adventure. But when you do a paranormal podcast, it's kind of like a science show. Go, it works.
Well, that's true. He knows you're talking about him. So,
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, but that's why I never talk too bad about him. He's just a nuisance. That's all. I'm not gonna say anything worse than that about him ever. But
so
so
there are a number of other ways that pets communicate that I haven't talked about. Like
I was just gonna ask actually. I'm like, when you communicate with them, do they actually like almost think like talk in human speak or like in a way? Or I was gonna ask like how that works because
yeah,
like
it's a good question. So it works in a number of different ways. So uh, any words that a pet will learn during its lifetime, they will repeat to me. I can because they can share that. It's all telepathic. For the most part, though, a lot of pets will um, show me images in my mind, or they will make me feel things. So often, a pet will share physical ailments that they had, either during their life that they remembered or when they passed, as they were passing. So there was one instance where a woman had four Westies, and each one of them died, and she wasn't certain about any of their deaths, like the method of why they passed. So I did readings for each one of them, and each one of them passed from different things. One of them told me that they were bitten by a snake. And when I told her that, she said, when I had that dog, I lived in a house with a big wooded area in the back, and I was always worried about snakes. And I found him on the back porch. So that makes perfect sense. So they were able to solve the mystery of their passings, which is interesting and comforting to the pet parent, at least, knowing that they didn't do anything wrong. One of the most heartbreaking cases that I did was for a woman whose Cocker Spaniel puppy passed away. And she wrote me and she told me that one night she was out with friends, and her husband called her and said, "You need to come home. The puppy's not feeling well. Something's going on. I don't understand." He ate dinner. He was fine. He went out back. He came in. He was fine. And then suddenly he's not getting up. There's something really wrong. So she came home and she called the emergency vet, and they said, you can take him in right now, or you can watch him for a couple of hours and then see how he's doing and then take him in. So she opted to watch the dog. Well, the dog passed away within 2 hours. It's a puppy. And she didn't know what had happened. So when I communicated with the dog showed me that he would go outside and he would start eating different plants.
Oh.
And when I realized exactly that he was eating plants that were toxic to him, and he was a puppy, so he had, his immune system wasn't really developed yet. So I looked up a list of toxic plants to dogs, and I sent her the email with the whole reading, and she wrote me back and she confirmed that there were quite a few plants in the backyard that were on that list. So she understood what had happened. And I said, it's not your fault. I mean, you didn't know. Obviously, if you knew, you would have taken the plants out, or you would have not let the dog eat the plants. And you have dogs, and you know that you can't watch them 24/7, but you can steer them away from things as much as.
Trust me, I just had to spend almost $1,000 because the youngest Mastiff puppy decided to eat, let's see, a sock, part of his rope toy, and a hair scrunchie.
Oh my gosh.
And the hair scrunchie was on the kitchen counter. We didn't think he could reach that yet, but, Mastiff puppies are huge, so he got up on his hind legs apparently and grabbed it at least enough to pull it off. And I mean, I literally had to take him to the emergency vet and sit there while they injected him with something to make him hurl. And literally I had to sit there and watch him on the floor hurling up all these things. I was like, what's that come out next? It's like a freaking magic show.
Oh my god.
And I mean, he's eaten socks before, but usually he throws them up overnight. Like, I'll find him in his cage the next morning, like thrown up. But it's just this time there's too much stuff down there, and it just didn't want to come up always. So that cost me a good $1,000 to figure out what was wrong with them, and then to take them to the emergency hospital to have that done. Which I'm happy they thought of it, because any other place would have been like, oh, we need to perform surgery on him, and that would have been a couple $1,000. So
yeah, sure. Wow, that's frightening.
Yeah, so now we watch him closely and make sure he doesn't eat anything. And we make sure all socks are out of the vicinity before he comes out. So, because he likes socks. I don't know why. Clean ones, dirty ones, he doesn't care. He just devours them.
Well, we have a dachshund, and he always likes to get my socks. If I put my socks down for 1 minute, they're gone. He just likes to take them with him and put them in his bed.
See, our older one, she would take clothes and just go chew on them and whatnot, but she never would actually eat them unless she just never got the chance, because we always caught her in time. But I'm pretty sure if she had the chance, she still wouldn't eat them necessarily. But she's also the doofus one, so she's the one I'd expect to do that. But I was gonna, and that it's funny you mentioned the snake bite thing because I was gonna ask because I did know another psychic who talked to snakes before. Have you ever actually talked to snakes or?
No, so I draw the line. There's an old song back in the 1970s called "I Don't Like Spiders and Snakes," and I'm all for that song because I just they're disturbing to me, so I can't connect to them.
I okay. I would have the same line if I had this ability. I'm just saying because I just don't. I was brought up to hate. I was brought up to fear snakes, so I kind of got over it now. I can actually watch them on TV without shivering. But I mean, it's still to the point where I wouldn't want to have to touch one or yeah, I'm good. Just no urge to ever do that with anything with snakes. My
Yeah,
son wants my 8-year-old son wants one as a pet, and I'm like, no freaking way in my house, never happening. I'm like, we got you dogs. Be happy you got dogs.
exactly.
So
So
since you talked with animals that have moved on though, do animals reincarnate? Do they the same as humans most likely do, from what I've been
yeah,
told?
I've learned that every living thing does. So we all come back because we all have that life energy in us. And but some people have asked me if their pet will come back during their lifetime, during their same lifetime. And what I have found is the answer is no. Um, and the reason is because our pets like to wait for us on the other side.
Makes sense.
Um, so some people have reported that their newly adopted pet is showing a habit or two that their pet who passed had. And they think it's the dog is reincarnated or the cat is reincarnated. And the answer is that I've learned is no. So what happens is when our dog or cat passes and we adopt another dog or cat, um, the dog or cat in spirit comes to visit and they train the new pet to do a habit or two that they had so that we would know that they're still around and they're training their new pet.
Interesting. And actually, I mean, that kind of makes sense, but I can't think of anything in particular that uh, Moose would do that Harley did. But then again, he didn't really do any tricks. He was too young for that. He just kind of he was a lazy dog too. He was a as the breeder said, he would be a TV dog because he would just watch it there on the couch all day with us and watch TV. But which kind of was true. I mean, actually, I guess they are similar that way, kind of. But I think it's just big dogs are lazy because they know they're going to be big and they're not going to have a lot of not going to have a lot of energy to do things, so they burn energy so fast. Even my
True.
even my mastiff that's almost a year old now, all she does is run around for like 5 minutes and she gets so winded that she has to go lay down. Like it's just the way it is. But
So I can give you an example of how that worked, even with our own dogs. So back in 2020, we had two dogs pass away. Our Weimaraner named Dolly, she was almost 16 years old, and she was my heart dog. She was the closest to me. And our dachshund Franklin, who was 16 and a half.
oof,
Now, Franklin, being a dachshund, was very stubborn. And Franklin had certain habits that were kind of annoying, but but he was who he was. So when we after they passed 2 years later, in 2022, we adopted a 9-year-old Dachshund Terrier mix. And this dog came from apparently an abused family. So we're working through his issues right now. But he has 5 distinct habits that only Franklin had when Franklin was alive. 5. No other dog has those habits, including the ability to somehow get tangled up in his leash every time he walks. And none of the other dogs do. And we have 3 dogs. But this little guy does it all the time. So we call him Franklin Jr. because we know that Franklin is actually guiding him to do some of the things that he used to do when he was alive. So we know Franklin's around.
huh? Interesting. That's amazing. Actually, that's just amazing. And yeah, I mean, it's just it's I don't know. I guess I don't know. Can it be that dogs are too young to really like if they haven't really learned any tricks at that point, like they really can't teach the next dog new tricks in a way. I mean, I guess you can't teach a young dog new tricks. Type of thing.
Well, I think we can all learn new tricks at any age, really. But I I don't know. But when we have spirits guiding us, so the spirits will also guide us and influence us to look at something. We talked about this a little earlier, but to look at something at a certain time. So they can also influence things in nature, and that means that they can influence birds or butterflies or something in nature that we see to behave erratically
Mm.
to let us know that they're around, usually on a birthday, the anniversary of their adoption or anniversary of their passing, or any kind of holidays. Um, One woman that I talked to told me that when her husband died, she had a groundhog that would came up to her window on her back porch and her sliding glass window and just stared in the house. And her husband used to stare at those or talk about those groundhogs all the time. So she knew that it was him sending that groundhog up there. And the groundhog did nothing but stand at the window for, she said, for about a good 15, 20 minutes. After her dog passed away, because her dog would always go to the window and bark at the groundhog.
Of course.
After the dog passed away, that was the only other time that groundhog came up to the window and stood there for like 15, 20 minutes. So she knew that her husband had brought the dog and they influenced that groundhog to come back.
Interesting. Huh. Well, I guess we'll have to wait because his birth anniversary or his passing anniversary is nowhere near coming up anytime soon. So we'll have to wait for that to see if anything happens with that one. But before we wrap up, though, I did kind of want to go into your Ghost on Vacation books because that's interesting, especially that you wrote one about England, which that fascinates me because anywhere in Europe that someone can communicate with ghosts, it's always interesting because it's so much history there. That did you ever talk like how many different time periods did you get into with spirits there?
Oh gosh, there were different centuries that ranged from the 1400s all the way up to the, I think, 1900s.
Wow.
Different ghosts in different time periods. So if you like history and you like ghosts, these are all the ghosts that I met when I went to England, and the book is full of history because I give you the history of the place that I visited. Um, and when I went to England in 2012, I went with my partner, and um, he had a fascination with the Tudors, the Tudor period. That's
Yeah.
his thing. Um, I didn't know anything about England, so the trip was organized. I didn't know anything about it. I just said, I'll go on it, and I'll just enjoy it as we go to different places. But every place we went, there was somebody dead that was trying to talk to me. So Westminster Abbey was actually one of our first stops, and there's a monk that haunts Westminster Abbey, and I saw him. There were a bunch of other people, but one of the craziest things was we were standing looking at the tomb of Anne of Cleves, who was one of the wives of Henry VIII,
Yes.
and we were standing about 20 feet apart from each other. And at the very same time, somebody pulled our hair on the opposite sides. It was like somebody had a reach of 20 feet and pulled our hair at the very same time on facing each other. And he turned to me, and I turned to him, and I said, "Somebody just pulled my hair." He said, "Somebody just pulled my hair," but there was nobody there. But
Hmm.
that was a crazy encounter at Anne of Cleves' tomb in Westminster Abbey.
Yeah. That would. I mean, that's actually happened in my basement to my wife. Like she'll be down there with the dogs or doing laundry or something, and all of a sudden she'll feel someone pulling her hair like gently, or someone like stroking her hair, or someone like stroking her shoulder, and it's obviously Rowley, the spirit who lives with us. But Because I mean, I'll be on the other side of the room with like doing something, and she'll be like, something just touched me, and I'm like, I'm going over here. Don't blame me. Like,
Oh my God.
so, and I don't know. He's a male ghost, so who knows? He definitely might be into her. I don't know. It's what spirits do can be so strange,
True.
but I mean,
So, so the other book that I wrote too about a medium's vacation is I went to Tombstone, Arizona. Are you familiar with Tombstone?
I know the history of it a lot because I was always into the whole like the old West history, and I actually had one of my show episode just released a week or two ago. She's related to Billy the Kid, and
Oh, that's right. I heard that one.
yeah, and like I'm friends with her on Facebook, and she posts about it all the time about like people trying to fight over like the ancestral rights to his name and whatnot. It's crazy, but yeah, so I know something about Tombstone. I've interviewed a few different people out there, but it's a very busy area from what I'm told.
Yeah, and the most haunted place in Tombstone, as I found out, was the Birdcage Theater, and I met 11 different ghosts there, and all of them were confirmed by the people who live there. I mean, who work there and live there. Um, the people that work there know all the history of the different people that lived there and died there, and they confirmed all of the ghosts that I met. And I have sketches. I think I sketched 5 ghosts, and they knew who they were. So they're all in the book.
Yeah, I think I actually heard a podcast episode a while back, a few years ago, where they went into detail about all the different spirits that live there still. But it's just, yeah, I mean, any place like that. I mean, the old West is kind of like the like Gettysburg is to the East Coast, where it's like just a huge area of spirits, ghosts that are stuck because they died in traumatic circumstances or they're stuck to where they were.
Yeah,
Which,
and I can't visit Gettysburg anymore. It's too traumatic for me. It's overwhelming. It's like being in a stadium with 10,000 people all screaming at you for your attention. So,
you're not the first medium to tell me that, so I can definitely believe it. I mean, I could only imagine. See, and actually, that's the one question I wanted to ask you before we wrap up is because I've got this answer from other medium psychics before, but does anybody have the ability to be a medium, or is it only like the select few who get the gift?
I believe that everybody does have the ability up to different levels. So if you go into a room of crowded room of people, and you'll always find someone that you want to say hello to. Conversely, you'll always find someone you want to be away from or avoid, and you're reading their energy. Mediums read the energy of people or pets who passed. So if you can read living energy, you can read the energy of people or pets who passed, and you just have to trust what you get.
Yeah, which I mean, personally, I can't read living energy because I've judged people wrong my whole life, and not in ways that have been good to me, but I've just judged people wrong my whole life. So I'm not going to read living auras. So I don't know how well I'd be living at sensing those that passed. I'm one of those ones that always wanted to but never could. Like why can't I have this ability? But I've been told I have it, but it's buried deep and it would take work to get it out. But we'll see.
Well, we all have different gifts. So,
Exactly.
Yep.
My gift is to spread the message of those who have the gift. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
That's a great gift because not everybody can do that. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But one last question because I just thought of it and I have to ask. Have you ever possibly encountered the ghost of a Bigfoot or another type of or any other cryptid in your travels?
No, I have not. Because I've really stayed to residential places and historic places like buildings and structures. So I've never encountered anything outside.
Interesting. All right. I mean, I can't blame you. I'm not an outdoors man myself, so I wouldn't be caught walking through the woods for no reason anyway. But so I get that. It makes sense. I just had to ask because if someone could talk to pets, then you never know. A Bigfoot could always came through if it was just if he were in a wooded area or something. But But before I let you go, one, thank you for coming on. It's been an amazingly interesting episode, and I can't wait for my listeners to hear it. And two, where can people find you? Where can they find your books?
People can find my books on Amazon.com, and all I have to do is type in Gutro, Gutro, and my books will come up. I have 10 of them. They can also find me my website online at robgutro.com or petspirits.com. That's probably easier to remember. It goes to the same place. And there's links to Amazon and so forth. So I also do pet readings. I do them by email. They're limited, and I'm booked a year in advance. So, but I urge people to pick up a copy of the book, because that way you learn how pet readings work and how you can learn how to see signs from your own pet. So thank you.
Well, I encourage people to please check out these books. I do want to check out a couple of them at least, and add them to my collection of books from people I interviewed that I never get time to read, but hopefully someday that will happen. Who knows? Maybe I'll find the time someday. But I do have a collection going, so yeah, never hurts to add more. Awesome. And of course, I will post all those links on the description for this episode as well, so people can just click and go. Because I really hope people do look into them, because from what I read, they all seem fascinating as could be to me. To me, at least. I mean, I can't speak for everybody in the world, but for me, they seem very fascinating.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I tried to make them easy to read. They're short enough and affordable. All of my books are under $10 because I'm self-published, so I can set the price as low as I can. So,
that's always a great thing, because publishers like to mark things up ridiculously. But
yep.
But I will thank you once again for coming on, Rob, and we will, and maybe we'll have you on again sometime, because I mean, there's still a lot we can cover, I'm sure.
Sure, it'd be great. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And to all my listeners, I will see you in half a week. Have a good one.